how today, right? Today, and there's a lot of these young folks, like you said, I think it's something like 60% of people and the teenagers and so forth think this would be a good way to live. And, but they're not, I mean, they're not necessarily explicitly anti-God. Do they? Do people know what they're really espousing?
And it's pretty profound when you say to a young person, you can't be a practicing Christian and a socialist because they're oil and water. They don't mix. How could you be an anti-God Christian? There's no such thing. So, and then, you know, sometimes they like to cite passages in the Bible, like in the book of Acts, where they all held things together, but that wasn't socialism. That was just a bunch of Christians sharing what they had during a tough time. So there is no biblical basis whatsoever for socialism, either in the Old Testament or in the New Testament. People who claim that there is just haven't studied it. It's not true. Because socialism is totally at the opposite end of the spectrum from what it means to be a God-fearing person. There's no room for God in socialism. In fact, they believe the church is the opium of the masses. They do everything, because if the church is in a person's life, it takes away from the loyalty that they demand from their adherents.
So, you know, in your book, I think the first chapter is about socialism. There's kind of elements of this throughout, actually. But you talk quite a bit about, I guess you call it cancel culture, right? But you see this as something like an extension of that system.
Yes, because one of the key ingredients of socialism, Jan, is that it is totalitarianism. It is, we would say it today, my way or the highway. There's only one viewpoint. There's no room for any other viewpoint. Socialism can't stand the light of contrary discussion because it doesn't have any ground to stand on. And so the way they deal with that is they just black out everything other than their own view. And we're seeing that in our country today. And I remember one night I was working on this project and I watched something on television where, you may have remembered this, there was a school, I think it was in Virginia, where they were going to disavow all of the holidays. They were going to take all the names of the holidays off and just call them student vacations or something. And they had a volatile parents meeting, and a parent got up to disagree, and the moderator slammed his fist on the table and said, "This is not a debate," and the meeting was done. That is as clear an illustration as I can see. If there's no room for discussion, if there's no room for disagreement, if there's no room for going back and forth and trying to understand each other, you've lost society altogether. What you have is a dictatorship. And totalitarianism is a building block of socialism that is very much a part of the culture cancer. Cancer is a good word for it. The culture of canceling everything that you don't agree with.
So, you know, what do you think about that, you know, a school board chair or a member basically saying, sorry, there's no debate, parents? What do you think about that?
Well, you know, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when he left Russia after he'd been there and in the Gulag, before he left, he gave a speech. And the speech was titled, "Live Not by Lies." And the first point in his speech was, you cannot allow yourself to live by lies. You may not be able to champion the truth, but you can refuse to live by lies. And that's what I think has to happen among American people. They can't allow themselves to go to a board meeting where there is no truth, because the truth has been lost in the woke culture of the leadership. They cannot do that. They have to stand up for the truth, and the truth is there somewhere. It is not just his idea. The chairman is being programmed by the ideology of socialism. If there's no way to push back on that, you've lost the game already. So cancel culture is a wicked thing. Interestingly enough, I gave a speech about that at this university back east, and there was a railing down in front. There was 13,000 kids in this event, and this girl came down and she was in tears, and she said, "My dad got canceled last week." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "He's a very well-known surgeon here in this area, and my mom is a very strong evangelical, and she loves God. And she posted some very positive things about Jesus on her website, and his partners saw it. And they got together and decided they don't want him in their group anymore, and they fired him. they just said, we don't need this religious stuff here, we don't need this, and so they just got together and disavowed their relationship with him, and she was in tears. Her sister came up later, and they were just saying, we're going to get through this, but don't tell me there isn't such a thing as cancel culture. My daddy got canceled. And that's happening across, people are really reticent to put anything in writing, to say anything that could get them in trouble. I tell the kids in our school all the time, you may think it's fun to mess around on your internet sites and all of that, but just remember that stuff doesn't ever go away. And don't put anything in there you don't want to come back and get in trouble for later. It's a whole different world.
But wait, so you're telling me that this surgeon basically got canceled out of the partnership he had because his wife, in a personal capacity, posted something religious?
They were so opposed to anything religious and so opposed to Christianity that they were embarrassed, and they didn't want anything to do with him, and she had gotten some positive feedback by it. Obviously, they had their 2 girls in a Christian university. So I don't know all the details behind it, but it was just interesting to me that immediately after I finished speaking and I gave the message on socialism that's in this book, she came up and told me that. And I've heard that from many people. And I know numerous people who have stood up for what they believe, not necessarily religious things.
Yes.
And still, because they don't follow the party line and they're not totalitarian, they're gone.
Well, and this is what I was going to say. It's not just Christians, not by a long shot.
No, sir. I live in that world, so those are the examples that I know of. Yeah. But I also know it's happening to a lot of people. And it's certainly not a part of the American culture and history, and it's not what I remember growing up with at all.
For America, freedom of speech, I mean, there's a reason it's the First Amendment. It's foundational, basically, to everything, even the really unfortunate stuff. And this is, it took me a while to kind of understand that. Father-in-law's a Holocaust survivor. I can't stand Holocaust denial. But I've kind of come to realize that if the moment you start basically deleting something based on, and you say, well, you just can't say these things ever, that is a line that basically takes you to be able to delete almost anything, right?
Well, and isn't it interesting that during all this time when we're canceling doctors, ideology from Iran and other places is allowed freedom in all of our social media sites, and things are being canceled that are silly, while all of this other stuff is allowed to happen.
Right. No, I mean, I think I remember that juxtaposition. Ayatollah Khomeini has a Twitter account.
Yes.
President Trump gets canceled in a Twitter account. How bizarre is that? So, what is around this cancel culture? You're saying, you're asking people basically to at least not live by lies, according to Solzhenitsyn's mantra, which I love. I love that was actually in the book. It's a favorite line of mine, because not everyone is ready to take the position that I'm going to go out and broadcast.
Nobody's going to stand. You and I may not even be comfortable going out in the marketplace and standing out there with a bullhorn and yelling about what we believe. But we all can refuse to live by lies. We don't have to do that. And when we see that we're being programmed by something that we know is not true, we have to walk away, because if you allow that to take over in your life's pretty much over.
This is so foundational. I love that we're talking about this, because that is the sense I get in so many different walks of life, that sort of the demand is increasingly that you accept, or at least verbalize, something which in front of your very eyes is just patently untrue. But if you say that, you could get in trouble.
There's nothing that is really true that should be afraid of challenge. Because I personally believe that all truth is God's truth, that truth begins with God. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so if it's true, it shouldn't be an issue for it to be challenged, because truth will win, no matter what the challenge is. But if it's not true, then you can. So all the stuff that's going on right now is interesting to me in light of that discussion, because most of it's not true. Most of it is just lies.